Hi, I'm Miss Fitz. I'm going to show you all the tricks that you need to know in order to raise your score. We're going to start with practice test 6 from the College Board. And the reason why I love starting with practice test 6 is because it gives you the everything you need to know in one module. So essentially, Mod 1 has all the little things that you really need to know in order to raise your score. So we're going to start with practice test 6. So if you haven't downloaded practice test 6, I'll give you a link and we'll start on page 3. Essentially, I'm going to break this down into the 5, even though I know that there's 4 different sections that you are scored on with the SAT test. You're scored on standard English conventions, which is grammar. You're scored on expression of ideas. I'll show you those. You're scored on craft and structure, and you're scored on information and ideas. So those are the 4 areas in your score report that you get. And each one of those makes up a certain percentage. Sometimes it's like 25%, 24%, 26% of your overall test. The way that I'm going to break this practice test 6 down, though, is into 5 different sections. So we're going to start off every single one of your SAT tests. We'll start off with this sentence completion. So in each one of these sections, this questions start off a little easier and then they get more difficult as you go along. And so in practice test 6, there are 1, 2, 3, 4. There are a total of 5 sentence completions. So I'm going to take you through each of these and show you the skills that you need to know in order to get all of these correct. Moving on, once you're done with the sentence completion, then you really truly are into the reading section. They start over. They start off over easier, and then they get more difficult as you go along. So easier ones on number 6, perhaps number 7, and then they are more difficult as you move through this reading section. You'll know you're in the reading section because you're seeing questions like describing the function of the underlined sentence, stating the main purpose, identifying the main idea. Those are very detailed reading questions. So I'll take you through the reading questions. Within and toward the end of the reading section, you'll have some tables. I'll show you what you're looking for on all the tables and strategies to use on all the tables or through the 3. When you hit the logically complete the text, then you know you've finished the real tough cognitive reading section. I'll show you the strategies you need to know to get through. Usually there's 2 logically complete the text on your test. I have occasionally seen 3, but essentially these are main idea questions. So once you hit logically complete the text, you should feel good knowing that you're toward the end of your test. And what's coming up next is the fun grammar section. And as I promised, the fun grammar section. So I'm going to show you the things that your English teachers probably haven't gone over with you in a while or ever. College Board in 2026 will have administered this test for 100 years. They know exactly what to ask you that you haven't seen in a while. So you know that on the math section, you haven't seen some of that math in a while. Same with the grammar. So I'm going to remind you about some of those grammar rules and the grammar boundaries that you need to know in order to do well on the grammar section. And then finally, I told you I'm going to take you through 5 sections. The very last of these bullets, it's like when researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. And I'm going to show you a quick way to get through this, quick and easy. And just basically, I really like it because they're telling you exactly what the answer is. It's just you're at the end of this module, so you're probably feeling a little tired and may overlook how specific they are in telling you what you need to know. So that's what we're going to get through today. And again, we're in SAT Practice Test 6. The link is below, or you can just Google College Board and SAT Practice Test 6 to get both the math and the reading portions of this test. All right, the very first thing I'm going to do is take us through, we're starting with number 1. I'm going to take us through and I'm going to show you the not only the strategy that I want you to use as you get through these or the sentence completions. So not only the strategy to use, but also I'm going to also introduce you to some of the grammar that you absolutely need to know to do well on the grammar section later. So let's get started. I am a big proponent of not looking at the choices before you read the text. So I always, if I'm sitting down with a student, I always have them read the text. I want you to read it first to get a sense of what it's like. The previous test that they had before 2016 gave us a clue about how intricate they are with similes. So I want you to really consider the fact that, again, next year, 2026, will be 100 years that College Board has proctored this test, and they know how to get in the head of a kid, a junior, a senior taking this test, and they know how to trick you. So here's one of the ways to usurp that trick is to read the text and come up with a very simple logical word that could take the place of that blank space. Kind of like a Taylor Swift song. You have a blank space, you want to put a word in it. You want to be very careful that you don't want to change the meaning of the sentence, but you want to just come up with a very simple logical word that could go in that space. So here's what it is. Though not closely related, the hedgehog trenches of Madagascar share basic blank with true hedgehogs, including protective spines, pointed snouts, and small body size. Traits the two groups of mammals independently developed in response to equivalent roles in their respective habitats. So as I'm reading that, I'm thinking they're not changing information in here. They're giving information that supports the front half of the sentence. So though not closely related, the hedgehog trenches of Madagascar share basic. And what I always love to do, if I can, is steal one of their words. And again, your eyes may have gone down to A, B, C, or D. I don't want to do that yet. I absolutely do not want to do that yet. I'm trying to come up with a word and use one of their words against them. So I could basically say that I'm going to steal the word traits. You see how I got that? So just traits. Share basic traits with true hedgehogs, including protective spines, pointed snouts, and small body size. Number one, I'm using one of their words against them. I know it's a fit. And number two, I'm not changing the meaning of the sentence. The hedgehog trenches of Madagascar share basic traits with true hedgehogs, including protective spines, pointed snouts, and small body size. So with that said, then I'm going to take my word traits and I'm going to come down and look for a synonym. I told you earlier. I hope I didn't say simile. Synonym. So traits, examples of, it's not exactly what I'm looking for, but I'll keep it. Concerns about is not what I'm looking for. I'm going to get rid of concerns about. C, indications of. I don't think they're indications necessarily. Or D, similarities with. That is a true synonym of traits. So similarities would go up there. And then I'll test it. Though not closely related, the hedgehog trenches of Madagascar share basic similarities with true hedgehogs, including protective spines, pointed snouts, and small body size. Traits the two groups of mammals independently developed in response to equivalent roles in their respective habitats. Similarities is the best one. All right. I mentioned that I was going to show you some grammar stuff, and this is really important grammar stuff. The very first thing, if you're taking notes, I would write this down. The very first thing is there's only a few reasons why I'm going to let any high school kid that I'm studying with choose commas. High school kids just absolutely love a comma splice. It is something that is near and dear to them. They would love a comma for anything. And this test knows that. So the more I can get you away from commas, the better. So I've actually come down with 3 reasons why you would even pick a comma in a sentence. The first one is exactly what we see here. We have a simple list. We have 3 things that are so similar. So it is a simple list and there's a comma and. So protective spines is one, comma, pointed snouts, comma, and small body size. You make simple lists all the time. You tell, whoever is running to the grocery store what you want. You make a very simple list, and it's one thing, a second thing, comma, and. So I really want you to think about that with a simple list. That's one reason why I'm letting you pick a comma. And then the second reason why I'm letting you pick a comma is to open and close and a positive. I'm going to really get into positives because unlocking a positives is the key to unlocking this entire test. You'll find answers if you can identify a positives, and you will get so much right on the grammar section. But a comma with information in between is an old lady term. A positive. I'm pointing at my gray hair. That's what I mean. Old lady term. The thing that you might be thinking is that you would never remember the word a positive, but you are going to remember the word yapping. And that's essentially what they're doing in a positive. They're just giving you a lot more information that you actually don't need. They want you to have it, but you really don't need it. In fact, a true positive means that you could actually cross that out and the sentence still can stand on its own. Let me show you an example of a positive that starts not with a comma. So there's different ways that we're going to see a positives. I mentioned that oftentimes they open and close with commas. Sometimes they open and close with parentheses. You have seen that 100 times where a parenthesis opens, they give you more information than you need, and you close the parenthesis. And I wonder if you've ever tried to just cross that information out and see that the sentence stands on its own. So parenthesis to parenthesis isn't a positive or yapping. Comma to comma is in a positive or yapping. And then a fourth way that they open up in a positive is with an M dash. And so an M dash is what you may or may not have seen here. M dashes are very important on this test. In fact, I would be very surprised if you didn't have one or two questions with M dashes on your grammar section. The M dash essentially is the same thing that we've been talking about. It's in a positive. The only thing with an M dash, and it's not a hyphen. So I want to show you the difference between an M dash and a hyphen. A hyphen is short. An M dash is basically opening up more information than you need to know. And if I get rid of that information, the sentence can still stand on its own. So M dashes, as I've highlighted, at this M dash opens with traits the two groups of mammals independently developed and closes with respective habitats. If this is a true or positive, I could actually put a period after small body size and we would be okay. The sentence makes sense. So though not closely related, the hedgehog tarantas of Madagascar share basic similarities with true hedgehogs, including protective spines, pointed snouts, and small body size, period. It has a subject, it has a verb, it has a predicate, it makes, complete thought. That can stand on its own. It's independent. It can stand on its own. And the M dash, if you notice, is yapping about what they just talked about before it, the subject just before it. And the subject just before it was true hedgehogs. They went in and gave a simple list so that we knew what the traits were of true hedgehogs: protective spines, pointed snouts, and small body size. And then they went in and they yapped even more about these traits. You see that? So this is like a really, really good look at an M dash. It opens with an M dash at traits and it closes with a period. That's the thing you do have to remember about an M dash. That's really, really important to remember. An M dash opens with an M dash and closes with a period, just like this. Or if an M dash is like lying in the middle of a sentence, the M dash is going to open with an M dash and close with an M dash. Those are really beautiful. When you see those in their natural habitat, they're so cool. I think we're going to get to see one in a little while. But I've taken a lot of time, almost 15 minutes here going over number one. But I really need you to know what a simple list is. It's a one thing, two things, comma, and. That's really important. for later on in the test. And I also really want you to know what an M dash is. And I also really want you to know what a positive is. So we've gone over those three things. And I will show you how you use them on the harder questions to help figure out, those really wordy ones where you get lost in the words. Identifying in a positive or identifying where they're yapping will help you out so much. So there we have it. Overall, simple list of positives, including an M dash, and also the strategy of not peeking down at the words to fill in the blank. Again, this test, they are writing this test in the hopes that you start with number or letter A, B, C, or D, and you take those words and pop them up there. In fact, I've had years and years of kids telling me, but this is the way I always test. But the thing is, that's why you're getting them wrong, is because they know exactly what they're doing, and they're going to give you synonyms. For number 2, remember I told you it starts off easy and then it gets more difficult. This one just gets difficult really fast. For number 2, the thing I really want you to notice is, as you're reading this, is that there will be a shift. So as I mentioned, sometimes we didn't notice M dashes, sometimes we didn't notice simple lists, sometimes we don't notice a positives as we're reading. Sometimes you don't notice that what they're doing in a very, very small reading section like this in number 2 is giving you some information and then shifting you to the opposite side. So on this one, let's see if you can identify where that shift happens. And I will tell you the reason why after we read this. Okay, so number 2. In editor Lisa Yasnick's introduction to her anthology, The Future is Female, More Classic Science Fiction Stories by Women, Yasnick identifies an increasing sense of some sort of feminist mode of writing in the 1970s. In contrast, see the shift, to many women-authored science fiction stories in the 1920s and 60s whose politics were less deliberately signaled. If you didn't notice that there was a shift in there the first time you read it, I want you to start looking for shifts now. The rest of this test now on the reading section is all about the shift. The answer is going to come from wherever you see where that shift is. So again, in editor Lisa Yasnick's introduction to her anthology, The Future is Female, More Classic Science Fiction Stories by Women, Yasnick identifies an increasingly sense of some sort of feminist mode of writing in the 1970s. In contrast, remember how on number 1 we stole one of their words and put it in the blank space? This in contrast is going to help me understand what word I can steal to put in this blank space here. So in contrast to many women-authored science fiction stories in the 1920s and 60s whose politics were less deliberately signaled. So would it make sense for us to take that and put that up here? An increasing sense of a more deliberately signaled feminist mode. You see what we did? We stole. We know it's the opposite because it's a contrast. They told us in contrast, and we have less deliberately. So the contrast is going to be more deliberate. So I'm going to go with a word that just means more deliberate. I have, now I've given myself a reason to come down and look at A, B, C, D. A, if you're like every other kid in the world, you don't know what this word means unless you're a very big reader. Big readers tend to identify with this word. Prudently. If you have no idea what these words are, you can't cross them out or say, I'm not going to choose that word. We just have to try to pull them apart. Sometimes this just becomes a game of I'm going to pull off prefixes and suffixes. So on A, what I want to do is pull off this suffix, ly. I don't see a prefix on here necessarily, but I do see a suffix ly, which is a common suffix. So I'm going to pull off that ly, and I'm going to get down to the root or base word, prudent. Prudent. Even if I don't necessarily know what prudent means, I'm going to still try to break these pieces down. It's like chipping away at a rock. I'm going to break it down until I can get down to a word that I do know. And I can see the word prude, a prude. So a sense of a prudently feminist mode of writing. if you know what the word prude means, you can get rid of it. If you don't know what the word prude means, you can't get rid of it. So, because this is a time test, sometimes we just have to leave words that we don't know. Just look for the words that we hopefully do know. The next word is overtly. So again, not a word that I hear in the hallways at high school very often, but I do see a suffix in there, ly. I'm looking for a word that's the opposite of less deliberate. And the root or base word after I get rid of that ly is overt. And I kind of like the fact that even if I don't know what overt means, I'm still chipping away at it. And something over, or kind of like it, I kind of feel like it means it's kind of in your face, so that could mean more deliberately. So we'll keep that one. Cordially, again, if you don't know what that word is, you have to get rid of that suffix, so the ly, we're down to cordial. If you know what that word means and you know it doesn't fit, you could get rid of it. But if you don't know what it means, you can't get rid of it. And then lastly, the word inadvertently. So I see as I'm reading that, I see a prefix in here, the in, and I see a suffix in here, ly. If I get rid of the suffix, let's start with the suffix, inadvertent. When I've heard of that, I think it means like I did it by mistake or I did it on accident. If I get rid of the in part of it, then I'm getting down to that root or base word, advertent. So again, what we're going to do is we're just going to look at the word that we're looking for, which is more deliberately signaled. We're still trying to find a word. And if something's more deliberately signaled, then I'm going to choose the word over. It's like in your face, kind of overtly feminist mode. So on this one, just as a review, there's a hyphen. That's not an em dash. That's just a hyphen. We're bringing two words together. I wanted to go over looking in the reading section. We reviewed making sure to find a shift. There's always a shift on the harder ones. There's always a shift. And tapping into that prefix and suffix work that you probably haven't done in a while. So let's keep going. Again, resist the urge to look down at these words. Resist that, because the answer is going to come from the reading. That's the key right there. That's how you can overcome this test, and you will overcome this test, is by understanding that the answers are in the reading. We don't take a math test where we, look, well, sometimes maybe, where you look down at the answers and then pop them all in. But more often than not, what we're doing on math is we're looking at the problem, coming up with our own solution, and then matching our solution down in the answer choices. And that's really what I want you to think about doing on this test, is the same exact thing. Let's think about treating this like a math test. Remember, we're looking for a shift. So the long-standing trend of overemphasizing teenagers and young adults in research on social media use. Scholars have recently begun to expand their focus to include the fastest growing cohort of social media users, senior citizens. All right, I want to look again for the shift. So the long-standing trend of overemphasizing teenagers and young adults in research on social media use. Scholars have recently begun to expand their focus to include. Scholars have recently begun. So there's my shift. They used to do something. They used to only look at teenagers and young adults in research on social media use, but now they have expanded their focus to include the fastest growing cohort of senior social media users, for example, senior citizens. So they have recently begun. So up in the space is the opposite. So we're looking back at something they used to do. There's something that makes me feel like maybe it was the overemphasizing. They made a mistake. That trend, this long-standing trend was overemphasizing teenagers, young adults, but now they're starting to do something new. So we have to have a word that is the opposite of recently begun. So I'm going to probably going back to like reviewing. It's the opposite of recently beginning. So reviewing the long-standing trend. I almost want to do a little stronger than reviewing, let's look at the answer choices. All right, exacerbating. Again, that's a word that most students are not familiar with. So what you want to do is try to come up with your strategy for getting rid of the suffix. I don't see a prefix. I do see a suffix. So the ing is a common suffix, and we get down to exacerbate. So if you're not familiar with what that word means, that means you can't get rid of it. We're going to keep it. We're looking for reviewing. So redressing, I kind of see a prefix and a suffix in there, but I'm not necessarily sure that I want to get down to the word dress. I don't know that necessarily, to dress is the way that we would usually think about putting on clothes. So the ing, common suffix, the redressing. When I say that out loud, I kind of am hearing like readdressing, or just that idea of going back to, and that is exactly what I was looking for. Have recently begun, rewinding, redressing. Let's keep that one. I like that one. Epitomizing, the suffix on here, the ing, we get down to epitomize. If I want to break it down even more, I could break it down to epitome. And I think a lot of kids are familiar with that word. The epitome, the best example of something. I don't think that would go in here. I don't think that necessarily goes in the front half. I think they probably think they're better. The epitome is like the best example. I think that they would think that would be the back half of it. And then precluding for D. So the is a very common prefix. The ing, so very common suffix. To preclude, so that would, I'm almost thinking like include, but pre would be like something like coming before, and including, but it happens before. So if I'm going to play the game, again, I told you sometimes this is a game of prefixes and suffixes. If I'm going to play the game of prefixes and suffixes, then I would probably narrow it down to redressing or precluding. Redressing means going back and kind of going back and fixing something in the past. And then precluding would mean it came way before. And essentially what I'm trying to find up here is rewind. So another word, rewind, review, reorder, going back and doing something again. So I do believe that redressing would be the best answer on there. Again, and as a review, the things that we looked at were prefixes and suffixes. And oftentimes that's the game you're going to have to play on the harder section, is to break it down and see, can I get down to a root or base word that can help me determine what the meaning of this word is? And if not, then let's really look at prefixes and suffixes. And I know we're only at number 3, but once you practice this a little bit, amazingly what happens is it's kind of like your brain treats it like a puzzle, and you start coming up with the actual word up there. The thing I do not want to skip is our next grammar boundaries thing, the colon. This is not a semicolon. It is not a hard stop. I'm going to say it again. The writers of the College Board have written this test for 100 years. They know exactly what you think when you see a colon. They know that you automatically think, oh, that's a list after it. And so what they're going to never do is give you an example with a list. Like, it's not going to happen. You're not going to see an example with a list after, because you get that right. And God forbid, you shouldn't, their job is to make sure you don't do that. So what we're going to do is think about that as, for example. I have given you now already like 3 ways to notice appositives: the M dash, a comma and yapping in between, a parenthesis with yapping in between about the subject just before it. And now this is another example of an appositive, but when you see a colon like this, you have to think to yourself, for example, because essentially what they did was they were giving you an example of the subject just before it. It helps so much on the reading section when you have no idea what you're reading. And then you see a colon and they're going to give you an example of what they were talking about just before it. It helps you just understand a really tough reading passage. Not only that, the thing to remember about this is that they often happen at the end of a sentence because, again, it's yapping. I don't need this information. I can cross it off in the sentence before it still makes complete sense. So we could say they're focused to include the fastest growing cohort of social media users, for example, senior citizens. So always think about a colon as their for example. In fact, if you read it with for example, if you didn't notice, I did it the first time out loud because I can't unsee it. And so if you think about it like that, you will always get it right. For example, senior citizens. What else do we need to know about that? I did say that oftentimes it comes in at the end of the sentence, but on the really, really tough grammar, it is not at the end of the sentence. It is smack in the middle of the sentence. I will try to show you an example of that. So that's our colon, and I love them. They're adorable, but if you won't get it right if you don't think to yourself, for example. Remember how I told you I really don't want you to look down at the ABCD choices, and I know that at this point you're probably wishing that things would go a little bit faster. If you haven't already put me on 2 times, then you're probably thinking about doing it. I understand completely. Here is the reason why. This number 4 is exactly the reason why. We don't just look at the word or look at the space and then go down and pick one of the words below to pop it in. Like, this is the epitome of the reasons why we don't do that. Before I even keep going, because I promise you, every other kid in the room when you're taking your test will completely look at that word that's underlined and think, disputing. I know exactly what that means. That's what my coach does with the umpires ruling. He disputes it. Or, the line, the person who calls the lines in tennis, you've seen a dispute. Hopefully you haven't seen one at school, but most likely you may have. So disputing means oftentimes the way that we think about it would be A. And I can't tell you how many kids on this test will look at that really quickly, think they're saving time, pick A, and then move on and think they got it right, and they didn't get it right. So we think that disputing always means arguing. It doesn't. That's what we're practicing, is seeing words used in different contexts. So never skip the very top part. So many kids will skip it. They're like, oh, truthfully, I love it when they tell me the truth, because in order for them to say that, they trust me a little bit. They know I'm not going to get mad at them, but I have to get them to not do that anymore. You do have to read everything. I wish I was that TikTok person that said you don't have to read everything. I've studied this test since 2010, almost as long as you've been alive. I know for a fact that you actually do have to read everything. I'll show you some shortcuts in the grammar section, but for the reading section, there's no shortcuts. You're going to get them wrong if you don't read it, because you're not going to have the right context. And again, 2026, they've written it for 100 years, and they know how to get you to pick the wrong one. So the following text is adapted from James Baldwin's 1956 novel, Giovanni's Room. The narrator is riding in a taxi down a street lined with food vendors and shoppers in Paris, France. If you haven't already, I hope you have a visual of this narrator riding in a taxi down a street lined with food vendors and shoppers in Paris, France. I haven't been to Paris, France ever, but I have been in a busy city, and I have been in a taxi, and I have seen how street is lined with food vendors and shoppers, and I imagine that taxi is not going very fast. What do you think? And so now we're going to come down here and we're going to think as though we are the narrator. That narrator is riding in a taxi down a street lined with food vendors and shoppers in Paris, France. And then we're going to read this part here. The multitude of Paris seemed to be dressed in blue every day but Sunday, when, for the most part, they put on an unbelievably festive black. Here they are now in blue, disputing every inch our passage, with their wagons, hand trucks, their bursting baskets carried in an angle, steeply self-confident on the back. So again, we're looking for the meaning of the word disputing, and we have to do it a little bit faster than I'm going now, I know. So here they are now in blue, disputing. See how that's a comma? Every inch our passage, with their wagons, hand trucks, their bursting baskets carried at an angle. These people are disputing every inch our passage. What do you think we could put in there? If they're disputing every inch our passage, and they have wagons, they have hand trucks, they're bursting baskets carried at an angle, steeply self-confident on the back. I really hope that these people aren't trying to go very fast down the street, because they're not going to be going very fast, because disputing every inch our passage, it sounds like they're blocking them from moving down the street. So blocking every inch our passage. So let's go with that word. It's not arguing. We already didn't pick that word. Disapproving of is another way. If the kids didn't pick arguing, then the kids from the past, not my kids, but every other kid will pick. If they didn't pick arguing, then they probably would pick disapproving of, because they think in the context that's what's happening. They're disapproving of. But this, and now that we've read it, we know that it's not disapproving of every inch our passage. They're blocking us. That are us. I put us with the narrator in the taxi. They're blocking us from going down the street with their hand trucks, their bursting baskets. C, asserting possession of. It's not terrible. I don't hate it that much. So we can keep C. Or D, providing resistance to. I think that means blocking. I think it's D, providing resistance to. So again, we got to see, we didn't see a ton of grammar. I'll point out one thing on the grammar section here, but I just wanted you to see a reason why we do not just look at the word and then come down and try to pick the answer. It doesn't work for you. It doesn't. I'm sorry. So here's the thing I want to show you. The possessive form of the plural possessive or the singular possessive. So the reason why it's an apostrophe S is there's only one James Baldwin. So right here on number 4, there's only one James Baldwin. We have an apostrophe S because he owns that novel. It is his novel. So we say James Baldwin's 1956 novel. Again, here's another one, Giovanni's room. Giovanni has one Giovanni, and Giovanni owns that room. So that's why there's an apostrophe S there. Let me see if I can find. I know you're wondering. If you aren't already, you will be wondering, well, when do we use the S apostrophe? Let me find some of those. That's when there's plural possessive. I can see just one here. It's the era center. So one era. When there's one apostrophe and one S, that means that it's singular possessive. There's one of them. And that will be, I promise you, that is going to be a large part of your understanding for the grammar section. Okay, last one, number 5. Let's pull it all together. So we're going to be looking for a simple logical word that goes in the space. While we're reading, we're going to be looking for that shift. And once we see the shift, we're looking for a word or phrase that we can steal from them to put up here in that space. There's always a shift. You should be reading for a shift. Oh, did you notice there wasn't a number 4? That was that is a fictional work. So when there's fictional work, oftentimes they give us that underlined word. See how this was different. They gave us a word in that underlined space because it was a work of fiction. When it's nonfiction, that's when we see the shift, and that's when they give us the space to fill in. Okay, so let's look for the shift. While recent scholarship has undermined claims that the works of 12th century Islamic philosopher Ibn Rushd were something, so this just tells me they're comparing to other philosophers of his time, Muslim philosophers of his time. It is indisputable that his location in the Muslim-ruled era of what is now Spain meant that his works were primarily available thousands of miles west of the era's center of Islamic thought. Okay, so it starts off with the while. So this gives us the front half of the information. While recent scholarship has undermined claims that the work of 12th century Islamic philosopher Ibn Rushd were something with other Muslim philosophers of his time, it now, here's our shift, it is indisputable that his location in the Muslim-ruled area of what is now Spain meant that his works were primarily available thousands of miles west of the era's center of Islamic thought. So it is indisputable that his location and the spread of his work meant that he seems like he must have been pretty important. And then the negative connotation up here has undermined claims. So that makes me think that they're thinking that he was less important. If they're comparing, so down here, we know that his stuff was really important. It is indisputable that he was in Spain, but his work traveled thousands of miles west of the era center of Islamic thought. In the top half, then it would be the opposite. He was rather perhaps unimportant. So let's go with that. Unimportant. A, controversial. That's not unimportant. Controversial is, there's a lot of kind of controversial stuff going on right now, but controversial is not the correct answer. B, antagonist toward. Antagonist. Even if you have to break that word down, I bet you remember the protagonist and antagonist when you were in ninth grade English class. Maybe you are in ninth grade English class and you're looking at the protagonist and the antagonist. Antagonists are always so much more fun. What would happen to an actual story if there was no antagonist? There would be no story. There has to be an antagonist. But he wasn't antagonist toward them. He was just, they once thought he was unimportant. Imitated by, so if you're imitating something, if I get off that ed, the suffix imitate, imitating just means to mimic, and I do not believe that they were pointing at the fact that he was mimicking anyone or that he was mimicked. And then finally, inconsequential to, unimportant, inconsequential. So we'll pick that one. So we just got through that, and it took a long time, but I promise you with a little bit of practice, coming up with a simple logical word that goes in the space is key to unlocking this test. Let's look at why. In the reading section, the very first thing I need you to do is to start looking at the questions before you look at the reading. You absolutely have to start with the questions. So in number 6, the question is, which choice best describes the function of the underlined sentence in the text as a whole? So we absolutely want to make sure that we know what they're asking us to do, because I can tell you the main idea. In fact, there's probably an answer down here that goes over the main idea, but they didn't ask me for the main idea. They asked me for the function of the underlined sentence in the text as a whole. I can tell you the author's purpose. They probably wrote an answer for a kid down here that is going to tell you, that's going to say the author's purpose. They write answers for the kids that don't understand what they're answering. So start with the question. It is so important. Now, there's different strategies for some of the different questions, but they're easy to remember. Here's the first one. The function of the underlined sentence in the text as a whole. So it really actually is a main idea question. What's the main idea? And then how does that underlined sentence really support the main idea? They always are going to support it. So let's look at this one. The function of the underlined sentence. So I do tend to, and again, I'm not that TikTok teacher that's going to teach you don't read the before or after, because the truth is this is a main idea question and you do need to know the little bit of before and after in order to answer the question and to understand what the function of the underlined sentence is. But I do want you to kind of just breeze over this underlined section, because so often they've given you a huge clue and now you know what you're looking at. So what do you see in terms of boundaries in here? I know you said M dash. I know you said M dash because all of this, all the way, I can't get it not to do to Johnson. So from this M dash to this M dash is all yapping about, we remember an M dash, the subject just before it. So it's yapping about expressionist landscapes painted in an expressionist style. That's exactly what's happening in here. It's yapping about that. Remember, an M dash is information that the author wants you to have, but you don't necessarily need to have it. Now, if I know, and you know now, what an M dash means, which is exactly what I just said, it expands on the subject just before it, then essentially what I'm thinking is this is a main idea question, and let's see what they're doing within the M dash. It's most of the underlined portion, so we're going to focus on that, and that's where our answer lies. Nonetheless, it's a main idea question. Number 6. On painter William H. Johnson's return to the United States in 1938, after a decade in Europe, his style underwent an abrupt transformation. Turning away from landscapes painted in expressionist style, a style that often involves using fluid, distorted shapes and a thick, textured brushstroke to express the artist's subjective experience of reality, Johnson began painting portraits of Black Americans in a bold new way. Evocative of African sculpture and American and Scandinavian folk art, these portraits featured flat, deliberately oversimplified figures in a vibrant but limited color palette. Overall, they're talking about this. So if I say main idea is Johnson's abrupt transformation from landscapes painted in expressionist style to a new style. I can just say that. I don't remember what the new style was. And the function of the underlined sentence is to give additional information about the he turned away. It was to give information about his old style. Simple enough. We came up with our answer, just like I told you, math, come up with your answer in your head, and then you go down and you won't get lost in the words because you know exactly what you're looking for. And that wasn't hard. So A, it elaborates on the previous sentence's statement about a transitional moment in Johnson's artistic career. Isn't that the definition of an M dash? It elaborates on the subject that came just before it. So A is very true. It elaborates on the previous sentence's statement about a transitional moment in Johnson's artistic career. I love that one. We'll read him. We'll read the rest, but I love that one. B, it provides information about Johnson's travels. I don't like that so far because I don't think that's true, but I'm going to read the rest of it. In support of a claim about his artistic influences, which is advanced in the following sentence. It wasn't about that. C, it recounts a moment. Recount is an important word. It goes back and talks about a moment in Johnson's personal life that enabled the success of his subsequent career, which is summarized in the following sentence. It wasn't about his personal life. It was about an abrupt transformation in his artistic style. Or D, it provides evidence that calls into question the previous sentence's characterization of Johnson's artistic development. Okay, let's look at A or D. It prevents evidence that calls into question. Oh, it's not doing that. It's providing support. M dashes are providing support about the subject just before, and A is the epitome, perfect example of an M dash, the definition of an M dash. It elaborates on the previous sentences. So A has to be. And if you understand that, you've just unlocked all of the function of the underlined sentence. I've seen a test where they had 4 questions that was the function of the underlined sentence and the text as a whole. If you can make it that easy, we just made that so easy. You can make it that easy. You're going to get those ones right. Because function of the underlined sentence in the text as a whole is a main idea question, and then what are they doing in that underlined portion to support it? That's what it is. All right, number 7. We're going to start with a question. Which choice suggests the main purpose of the text? Essentially, this is not a main idea question. The difference between main idea, which is what is it mostly about, and main purpose is what is the author doing. So if you notice on a main purpose question, all the answers start with a verb because that's what they're doing. A verb is what they're doing. So to provide, verb. To assert, verb. To discuss, verb. To describe, verb. And that's essentially what they're doing. If you were younger and your teachers had you think about this, when you're doing author's purpose questions, this is such a simplistic way to think about it. If you think, are they persuading me? Are they informing me? Or are they entertaining me? It's pie. Are they persuading, informing, entertaining? And that's how you think about author's purpose. It'll be so easy for you to come up with your answer before you get down to the answer choices. Let's think about that. When classical pianist Martha Argerich performs, it appears as if the music is coming to her spontaneously. She's highly skilled technically, but because of how freely she plays and her willingness to take risks, she seems relaxed and natural. Her apparent ease, however, is due to a tremendous amount of preparation. Despite Argerich's experience and virtuosity, she never takes for granted that she knows a piece of music. Instead, she approaches music as if encountering it for the first time and tries to understand it anew. So as soon as I read that, then I stop, I come back. What was the author doing in there? I think the author was informing us about the way that a classical pianist prepares to play. How does that sound? Okay, now we come down to our answers. And remember, I was thinking persuade. There was no persuasion in there. Inform, yeah. Entertain, it's the SAT. It's not going to be very entertaining. I mean, this was a little entertaining. It made me think of Lindsay Sterling, but that's aside. Okay, A. To provide details about how Argerich identifies which pieces of music she will perform. That's very specific. I did not say that when I said what was the author doing in there. If the whole thing was about which pieces of music, then I would pick no. B, to assert that Argerich's performances look effortless because of how she prepares for them. You see how that's a lot broader? So the very specific ones oftentimes are not going to be the answer. That one was so much broad. It's not so specific about which pieces of music she will perform, but how she prepares for her performances. I like that. C, to discuss the kinds of music Argerich feels most comfortable encountering for the first time. Very specific. That's very specific. Yeah, they might have talked about it. Ooh, they might have said it word for word, but there's another trick. They love for you to match words. So if you're starting to get tired and you don't want to do the work before you look at the answers, oh yeah, I'll match those words. Sure. That's wrong. So no, not C. And then D, to describe the unique way Argerich approaches music she hasn't performed before. Again, look at they said that in there that she never takes for granted that she knows a piece. She how she approaches music that she hasn't performed before, but that's only a part of it. All in all, the bigger picture was D. I said D. B. To assert, I said B and then and went to highlight B, and then said D. To assert that Argerich's performance look effortless because of how she prepares for them. That one can't be wrong. It's very, very broad. Yeah. Okay, so we have gone over function of the underlined sentence, main purpose. Here's another function of the underlined sentence. So again, the first thing I do, because so often there are em dashes in the function of the underlined sentence. And so essentially, they are telling you what the answer is. They're saying this is elaborating on the subject just before it. Here's an em dash. There's the em dash closed. It's so cute in its natural habitat, and it's lying there. Now, the truth is, that's in a positive. I can cross out that whole that whole highlighted section, and the sentence will make sense. His employer, I'm just starting here, his employer providing false to the contract in the manner of land, and there being no law in the country to force him to fulfill it, Israel was obliged to look round for other means of livelihood than clearing out a farm for himself in the wilderness. So the truth is, on these positives, I can take them out and the sentence will still make sense. I just read it without that whole highlighted section, and it made sense. However, the answer is within that because it's asking us which choice best describes the function of the underlined portion in the text as a whole. So let's go ahead and have a look at what this is. So 8. The following text is adapted from Herman Melville's 1855 novel, Israel Porter. Israel is a young man wandering through New England during the late 18th century. Oh, in case, remember I said that an M dash is yapping about the subject just before it? You might have questioned, but Israel is a person wandering through New England during the late 18th century. He hired himself out for 3 months at the end of that time to receive for his wages 200 acres of land lying in New Hampshire. Ooh, beautiful. His employer providing false to the contract in the matter of the land, and there being no law in the country to force him to fulfill it. Israel, who, however, brave-hearted and even much of a daredevil upon a pinch, seems nevertheless to have evinced through many parts of his career a singular patience and mildness, was obliged to look round for other means of livelihood than clearing out a farm for himself in the wilderness. Oh, that's a sad little excerpt. So we're looking for the function of the underlined portion of the text as a whole. So it's a main idea question. Main idea, Israel Potter wanted to be a farmer, and he couldn't be a farmer because his old employer basically stole the land from him. But the function of the underlined sentence is to tell us about him. He's brave-hearted and even much of a daredevil upon a pinch. Seems nonetheless to have evinced through many parts of his career a singular patience and mildness. Those all sound like wonderful things. I wouldn't mind at all if anybody called me any of those things. I would love to be called brave-hearted, a daredevil. I'd love to be called a daredevil. I'm not, but I would love to be called a daredevil. Many parts of a career, patient, mild. So he's got a lot of good characteristics. And again, M dash, the definition of an M dash is opening, closing. This is all yapping about Israel. So the function of the underlined sentence is to give us positive characteristics about Israel. Does that sound okay? Okay, let's look at A. Notice too, I haven't been going up and down. Like my eyes have not been going back up into the text to see if I got the answer. We're doing this like math. We're coming up with our answer before we go down there. Just get used to that. It saves so much time. You will never run out of time if you do this. You'll come close to running out of time because you're smart and you're going to think about things, but do it this way. I promise it makes so much more sense, and they can't get in your head. You're outsmarting the SAT. Okay, A. It implies that Israel treasures a particular characteristic of his personality when that characteristic should usually be regarded as a flaw. You see the importance of reading the whole thing? Because I loved the first half of that one. It implies that Israel treasures a particular characteristic of his personality, because that's what the underlined portion was all about, was the characteristics of his personality. But when that characteristic would usually be regarded as a flaw, they lost me on that part of it. So I'm going to get rid of A. B. It suggests that if not for a certain aspect of his character, Israel might not have been as easily thwarted in his ambition to establish a farm. All right, let me see what that. It suggests if not for a certain aspect of his character. Let me think about that, because I do remember it was all about his character. Israel might not have been as easily thwarted in his ambition to establish a farm. That's true. A lot of kids will not like this one because they don't like the word thwarted, but that means something came in the way and got him off track. So he was thwarted in his ambition to establish a farm. That's true. So I'm going to keep B. I will tell you, most kids will cross out B because of that word thwarted. Do not cross out answer choices that and contain a word that you don't know. Please don't do that. Just don't do that. All right, C. It shows why Israel would not have been able to undertake the enormous amount of labor necessary to run a farm, even if he had owned the necessary property. It shows why Israel would not have been able to undertake the enormous amount of labor necessary to run a farm, even if he had owned the necessary property. That's not true. He could have run a farm. He had tons of years. The reason why he didn't run a farm is because it was stolen from him. Or D, it explains why, when the situation requires it, Israel is able to undertake courageous acts that others would generally avoid. The only thing I'm going to tell you about D is a lot of times they'll bring in stuff that is not in the reading. Like there's no type of comparison Israel to other people of this time. And it's not necessarily explaining why Israel is unable to take the courageous acts. In fact, it said he was courageous. All of that kind of says courageous. I would not say that D would be the correct answer at all. Who, however, brave-hearted, much of a daredevil, seems nevertheless to have a vice through many parts of his career, singular patience and mildness. That all sounds kind of courageous to me. And others would generally avoid. We didn't bring any other comparison. So that would be kind of going outside the text. And you never, ever, ever want to do that on the SAT. So I got rid of A, I got rid of C, I got rid of D, and that leaves us with B, which is the correct answer. I hope that when you see text 1 and text 2 on your test, you're just so excited. I love a good text 1 and text 2. They are always so easy, and here's how to answer them all the time correctly, knowing that they're trying to trick you. So I can't tell you how many times I have heard the first time I sit down with a kid and they're like, all right, to tell the truth, I read text 1 and then I skim over text 2. Well, again, 2026 will be 100 years. College Board knows that kids are going to do that. And so they know where to put the answer. And of course, it's the best place to hide a book is in a library. The best place to hide an answer is where a kid will never look. So it's in text 2. The answer is always in text 2. So we are going to read text 1. That's not to say we're going to skip over text 1. We're going to read it for context because sometimes text 2 can be a high level of rigor. Sometimes it can be very hard to read. So we're going to go ahead and read text 1 to get the idea. Now, the other thing that you have to remember is text 1 and text 2, these two, and it's true on ACT as well, they always disagree. These two are never going to agree. They're going to agree about the topic, but they will always disagree about the way to get to that topic. So that's one thing to keep into consideration, and also a reason why you should look forward to this because they're fun. These are really fun. So let's read text 1. I'm going to pause and then we're going to just think to ourselves. And I'm not good at thinking to myself. I'm going to say out loud what I think text 1 is about. And then we'll go on to text 2 to find out what our answer is. All right, text 1. In 1954, George Balanchine choreographed a production of The Nutcracker, a ballet by Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky. It has since become a tradition for hundreds of dance companies in North America to stage The Nutcracker each year. But the show is stuck in the past with an old-fashioned story and references, so it should no longer be produced. Ballet needs to create new traditions if it wants to stay relevant to contemporary audiences. So essentially, text 1 is saying it's irrelevant. It is stuck in the past. It should no longer be produced. And then I automatically think to myself, because I know text 2 is going to say the opposite. Text 2 is going to say it should be produced. It's not so I want to say something about old fashioned. Maybe it's not so old fashioned. It should be produced. And it should continue. So text 1 is saying discontinue. It's old fashioned and it should no longer be produced. I'm assuming text 2 is going to say the exact opposite. Let's see. Text 2. The Nutcracker is outdated, but it should be kept because it's a holiday favorite and provides substantial income for some dance companies. Although it can be behind the times, there are creative ways to update the show. For example, Debbie Allen successfully modernized the story. Her show, Hot Chocolate Nutcracker, combines ballet, tap, and hip hop and other styles, and it has been gaining in popularity since it opened in 2009. Okay, so exactly that, yes. So we should keep it. It can be modernized and has been gaining in popularity. Opposite, exact, right? So we're going to take that and look for our answer. A, by questioning the idea that the story of the Nutcracker is stuck in the past and rejecting that suggestion that contemporary audiences would enjoy an updated version. Look at that. If you only read text one, you would have picked that one and thought that you were right. Because that's what text one was. See what I told you? They're writing answers. They're writing the answers for the ones that are going to pick the wrong answer. They have to do that. They can't just write for right answers. They are going to write answers for the ones that are only going to read text one. In fact, let's look at B. By agreeing that contemporary audiences have largely stopped going to see the performances of the Nutcracker because it's so old-fashioned. Again, that's for text one. So A and B are for the kids that are only going to read text one, and they're the wrong answers. And isn't that sad to think now that a kid is going to go in there and read text one, find an answer that they know is right, and then leave and think they did well on the test and then get their score? That's exactly what I don't want to happen to you. That's why I'm making this video, is because I watched that happen to so many kids. So A and B are out because those are only about text one. C, by pointing out that most dance companies can increase their incomes by offering modernized versions of the Nutcracker. I like the back half of it. The front half of it is very specific. They're increasing their incomes, but let's see what D says. By suggesting that dance companies should consider offering revised versions of the Nutcracker instead of completely rejecting the show. You see the difference between the two? C got so specific. C just got really specific, but D is it. D is the correct answer. You cannot argue that D is the correct answer. D is the correct answer. So now you know text one and text two. Read text one for the idea, the general overall idea, and then read text two to find where the answer. And no, you can't just read text two. You have to read text one. And it's short, but you have to go in there. This is the only way you're going to get any background knowledge. And that is so important with reading. And this quick test, you have time to do it. I promise you have time to do it. But you're going to read text one and text two. Okay. And now we are on a main idea. Main idea are wonderful because they're so easy to come up with your answer before you get down to the answers. Number 10, main idea of the text. To understand how Paleolithic artists navigated dark caves, archaeologist, I'm not going to try to say the names, and her team tested different lighting methods in a cave in Spain using replicas of artifacts found in European caves with art. They used 3 different Paleolithic light sources. Here's a simple list within an M dash. Torches, animal fat lamps, and fireplaces. So comma, comma, comma. Determining that each likely had a specific purpose. For instance, the team learned that the animal fat lamps were less useful than torches while walking because the lamps didn't illuminate the cave floor. This is main idea. So this is like, what is it mostly about? We want to be very careful that we're focused on what is it mostly about. So to understand how Paleolithic artists navigated dark caves, I'm not going to reread the whole thing. What I actually want to look at is that the M dash gives us a really good clue. So they tested different light sources. We're not going to go so specific about what those light sources are, but they tested different light sources in dark caves. That's kind of it, right? It was mostly about testing light sources in dark caves. Let's stick with that one, okay? So A, Medina and her team's study demonstrated that fireplaces were essential to the creators of Paleolithic cave art. That's way too specific for it to be a main idea answer. We're going to get rid of A. B, Medina and her team discovered that Paleolithic cave artists in Spain used animal fat lamps more often than they used torches. Again, we're not we're not here to figure out like the specific stuff. It's just they were testing light sources in dark caves. So that's too specific. A and B are out. C, Medina and her team were reluctant to draw many conclusions from their study because of the difficulty they had replicating life sources based on known artifacts. I don't think they said they had a hard time. I don't even think that was in the text, that they couldn't draw a conclusion from their study. So let's see D. Medina and her team tested Paleolithic light sources and learned some details about how Paleolithic artists traveled within dark caves. Isn't that basically what we're looking for? It's so broad. They learned some details. It didn't go in and tell us details, some details about how artists traveled within dark caves. I like D. And now we have come to our very first table. So many kids want to just come up here and look at the table to get an idea of what they're looking at. Let's not do that. Let's stay with looking at the question. Which choice most effectively uses data from the table to complete the statement? When they tell you you're using data from the table to complete the statement, they're telling you this is a main idea question too. So it's just like that one that we just completed about dark caves. It's a main idea question. What is it mostly about? Can't be too specific. We're using data from the table to complete a statement. All the table, the whole table. So it can't be very specific. So a student is using the table as part of a social studies class presentation on the U.S. auto industry in the early 20th century. The student notes that according to the table from 1910 and 1925, so from 1910, now I'm looking at the table, from 1910 to 1925, and then I'm just going to look and see, is there anything that I could notice before? So from 1910 to 1925, the number of cars produced definitely went up, and the number of car companies producing cars went down. And then A. Like that one can't be wrong. So essentially, when you're at a table, and a lot of people do believe that the tables, and I believe, actually, I personally believe, because I've taken every practice test and at least once or twice or three times, the tables do tend to take me a little bit more than a reading. I know I still am starting with a question. So uses data from the table to complete the statement, tells me it's a main idea. We're completing the statement and we're needing to use the main idea in order to complete that statement. So use the question to help guide you on what you're going to actually be looking for. And that one was easy. They're not always that easy. May you have lots of easy ones. Okay, 12 and 13. Which response sometimes, and here's an example. Sometimes they tell you, out of all this reading, there's only one little thing I need you to really pay attention to. Which response from a survey given to shoppers who made a purchase at a retail store best supports the researcher's explanation? They're telling you, find the researcher's explanation and you'll find the answer. So what's the researcher's explanation? External shopping clues are a type of marketing that use obvious messaging. A display featuring a new product, for example, or a buy one, get one free offer to entice consumers to make spontaneous purchases. In a study, data scientist Sam Coy and colleagues found that this effect can also be achieved with less obvious cue. For example, rearranging a store's layout. The researchers explain that trying to find items in new locations causes shoppers to move through more of the store, exposing them to more products and increasing the likelihood that they'll buy an item that they hadn't planned on purchasing. So just in case you got lost in the words and forgot what we were looking for, we're looking for the researchers' explanation. The researchers explain that trying to find items in new locations causes shoppers to move through more of the store, exposing them to more products and increasing the likelihood that they'll buy an item that they hadn't planned on purchasing. And essentially, that's all we're doing, is we're looking for the one that says, I was going to a store to find something, where it usually is because they were rearranging a store's layout. I went to a store to find something that I usually found, and on the way, I found something that I hadn't planned on purchasing. Simple, right? That once you understand that the question is telling you exactly what you have to look for, it becomes very simple. All right, let's read A. I needed some cleaning supplies, but they weren't in the regular place. When I was looking for them, saw this interesting notebook and decided to buy it too. That's perfect. That's a perfect answer. B, I didn't buy everything on my shopping list today. I couldn't find a couple of the items in the store, and even though I looked all over for them, that means that's the opposite of what they're going for. They rearranged the store so you couldn't find the thing you wanted and bought more. B is no. C, the store sent me a coupon for a new brand of soup, so I came here to find out what kinds of soup that brand offers. I decided to buy a few cans because I had a coupon. That's not the motivating factor. The coupon isn't the motivating factor. The reading says that it's rearranging the store, so I don't like C. And D, the store is larger than one that's closer to where I live. It carries more products. I came here to buy some things that the other store doesn't always have. The whole explanation is I'm prompting you to buy something that you didn't expect to, and A is the perfect example. May you have many of those easy ones on your test. But again, starting with the question in mind. I am going to review really quickly because I cannot look at a really good M- in its natural habitat and not just want to point it out. In fact, there's two things that were so exciting for me that I almost shouted it out while I was reading. Okay, here's the first one. This M-. So a display featuring a new product, for example, or a buy one, get one free offer. Now, here's the deal. This is a true or positive. If I get rid of it, the sentence still makes sense. So external shopping cues are types of marketing that use obvious messaging to entice consumers to make spontaneous purchases. Understanding that that's what an M- is. It's yapping about the subject just before, the obvious messaging, but you can pull it out and the sentence still makes sense. That right there is key. We're almost to the grammar section, and there are questions on the grammar section, so you have to know that. Here's the other thing that I don't want to move on without pointing at, for example. So this effect can also be achieved with a less obvious cue. For example, rearranging a store's layout. Like, I absolutely cannot move on without making sure that you saw that those were two things in there. I need you to start seeing them every single time. And maybe you were yelling at me through the camera that you saw them. Don't think I didn't see them. Okay, start with the question. Which statement about the exhibitions, if true, would most directly support the underlying claim? So we're looking to support the underlying claim. Now, okay, this is different. You have seen before the function of the underlying sentence. You've seen it as the function of the underlying sentence in the text as a whole. This is different. They are really bringing your attention to this underlined portion and saying this is the underlying claim. So we're just reading it to understand what are they claiming. Yeah. In the 2021 exhibition, This Is the Day at Arkansas's Crystal Bridge Museum of American Art, featured works dealing with expressions of faith and spirituality in the Black community. The museum's 2022 exhibition, The Dirty South, meanwhile, focuses on Black culture in the American South from 1920 to 2020, with a particular focus on the intersections between visual arts and music. Together, these exhibitions didn't merely highlight the diversity of the Black experience in the U.S. That's a period. That's a period right there. It's a semicolon. It's a period. They also showcase the diverse media through which artists have depicted and engaged with that experience. That's the claim. They also showcase the diverse media through which artists have depicted and engaged with that experience. This is our very first time seeing a semicolon. A semicolon is a period. They are the exact same thing. It is a boundary. It's a hard boundary. It's a hard stop. Where you see a semicolon, you can put a period. We will go over semicolons, but this is the first example. So authors will use a semicolon when these two pieces of information are so closely related. It's almost a flex to put a semicolon in between the two. But you have to remember, like, they can stand on their own. They're independent clauses. They also showcase the diverse media. In the first half of this, together, these exhibitions, so they're talking about one subject, the exhibitions, and they're saying these exhibitions didn't merely highlight the diversity of the Black experience in the US. That was the first thing. This in the exhibition, it did two things: highlighted the diversity of the Black experience and showcased the diverse media through which artists have depicted and engaged with that experience. We're only looking for the diverse media. We are not looking for the diversity of the Black experience in the U.S. Equally important, but they underline the diverse media. And think to yourself, what's diverse media too? We know what diversity means. Everybody has an idea what diversity means. And so diversity in media would mean lots of different media. And if I think about that, then I just think I think I've been to art galleries before where they had sculptures and paintings and maybe like something visual projected on a screen that was moving. I've seen that before. Art is everything. Art is like sidewalk chalk. I've seen some very intricate art on sidewalk chalk. So like diverse media through which artists have depicted and engaged with that experience. So they are, they're giving us two examples of the exhibitions and what those exhibitions did. Highlighted the diversity of Black experience, semicolon, showcase diverse media. Okay. I've talked a lot. So underline claim, which one supports it? Between them, This Is the Day, and The Dirty South include drawings, paintings, photographs, sculptures, textiles, videos, costumes, and music. That's very diverse. I forgot about textiles, like dresses and that sort of thing as art. The Met Gala, that's an example. So absolutely, I like A. B, This Is the Day included works by fewer than 24 artists, whereas The Dirty South included works by more than 80 artists. That's not really telling us anything about diversity. And it's definitely not about media. It's about the artist, but it's not about the media. And we're looking for the media. C, This Is the Day exclusively included works in the permanent collection of the museum, whereas The Dirty South included works from multiple sources outside the museum. I guess they're going for that being diversity in media, but I don't think that's what diversity in media means, is not where it's stored. And then D, between them, This Is the Day and The Dirty South, including works depicting more than 300 years of the Black experience in the United States. That's talking about that first part of the semicolon, but that's not the underlined semicolon. So A would have to be the answer. So we got to see a semicolon. That's coming up too. All right. 14. And I will say at this point, this is where everybody gets fatigued. Like there's never been a time that I worked with a kid where we didn't hit 13, 14, 15, and they were like nearly fried about the reading. I'm glad that it's a table. It kind of breaks it up a little bit, but I will tell you that what we have to look forward to is another table. A hypothesis question. We'll get through that. And then we get down to our 2 logically completes the text. And then around 18, 19, 20 is always the rest is grammar. And that goes fast. So you've gotten through, we're nearly through the long reading, the stuff that is actually going to take the brain power. Now, I do think, again, that tables do, especially this. I mean, did you notice? You probably didn't notice. This is a lot. So long answer choices, a whole page. It's put it exactly where we're tired. So I feel you. It gets tiring. But as always, we are going to start with what we know. We're going to start with which choice best describes data from the graph that support the researcher's conclusion. So we're not completing anything. Last graph was easy. We were completing the thought. This is specifically the researcher's conclusion. Now, once again, we are not going to get it by looking at the graph first. You don't know what the researcher's conclusion is, so don't spend any time up there yet. So we do have to read it. I'm Again, I wish there was a cheat code to that. And yes, you do have to read the whole thing. That support the researcher's conclusion. So we're going to read for the researcher's conclusion. To investigate potential cognitive benefits of taking leave from work, psychologist Jan Packer and colleagues conducted a 6-month study of Australian university staff members who took no leave from work during the study, took 2 to 4 days of leave, or took 1 to 5 weeks of leave. Tests of all attentiveness were administered to participate 3 times during the study, at random for the no leave staff, and for the rest, 1 week before their leave, 1 week following their return to work, and 1 week after the second test administration. After analyzing the results, the researchers concluded that longer leave times, I found the conclusion. Researchers concluded that longer leave times might not confer a greater cognitive benefit than shorter leave times. So longer leave times are not better than shorter leave times, or shorter leave times are better than longer leave times in terms of cognitive benefit, which is just your brain power. So I know nobody wants to hear that, but shorter leave times. And then they're telling us up here in the graph that no leave, shorter leave times is like 2 to 4 days of leave. And then longer leave times is 1 to 5 weeks of leave. So shorter is better than longer. And then that is always going to be supported by the data in the graph. But I don't necessarily want to go into that yet, because I know what the answer has to have. The answer has to say that longer leave times are not better than shorter leave times. That's it. In fact, the answer actually can't even talk about no leave because it's not in the conclusion. The question said, support the researcher's conclusion. And in order for us to do that, we can't talk about no leave. We can only talk about 2 to 4 days of leave being better than 1 to 5 weeks of leave. See how we got that? That's key. All right, let's look at A. In fact, I'm going to come over here and cover. In the second test administration, participants who took 2 to 4 days of leave had higher average attentive scores than those who took no leave. And they brought in no leave. But in the third test administration, those who took no leave had higher average scores than those who took 1 to 5 weeks of leave. You may be like wishing that I would move myself out of the way of the table, but I'm not going to, because I don't need that stuff. Right here, they brought in no leave. They can't talk about no leave. It's not in the conclusion. So let's move on. I don't like that one. B, in the first test administration, participants who took 2 to 4 days of leave had lower average attentive scores. Their conclusion was the opposite. 2 to 4 days was going to be better. Shorter is better than those who took 1 to 5 weeks of leave and those who took no leave. So no, shorter is better. That one's not good. C, in both the second and third test administration, participants who took 2 to 4 days of leave had higher average attentive scores than did participants who took 1 to 5. Shorter is better. They had higher cognitive attentiveness, brain power, all of that. So I like C because that's exactly what we're looking for. Or D, in the second and third test administration, participants who took 2 to 4 days of leave had higher average attentiveness scores than did those who took no leave. Oh, we're comparing no leave again. We're not interested in no leave. So C would be the correct answer on this one. Just as a review, I started with a question. They told me to look at the researcher's conclusion, and I only took information from the researcher's conclusion. I wasn't answering anything else. And did you notice I didn't use the table? So when they tell you something like support the claim, support the researcher's conclusion, those type of things, you pay strict attention to whatever they tell you. They're pointing at the answer, and then they're going to bring in other things for the kids who are going to use some kids are not even going to read the section, and they're going to try to spend their time looking at the data. And had I done that, I probably would find that some of them are true with the table. Like they are going to write ones that are true with the table. Like I'm not going to waste my time now or yours because I know I don't need to, but some of them are true. A researcher's conclusion. Really quickly, there I told you I was going to find a plural possessive. So notice how it says S apostrophe for the researcher's conclusion. So that means that there's a bunch of researchers and they all came up with a conclusion. So in order for us to show ownership that they do own the conclusion, it's S apostrophe. Isn't that cool? So we have seen a lot of apostrophe S. And then S apostrophe is plural possessive, meaning there's a lot of researchers. See how they didn't do anything? They just, there's no apostrophes in here because there's just a bunch of participants. There's more than one participant. There's just a bunch of participants. They don't own anything. Trying to see if I can find another type of apostrophe. I don't see one. I'll keep looking, but we got to see a plural possessive. So a bunch of researchers and they own that conclusion. Okay, another table. As we learned, we're going to start with a question. Which choice most effectively uses data from the graph to complete the text? That means it's a main idea question. That means we're getting most of it here, but we do have to use the graph in order to answer the question. So let's start with the reading. It may seem that the optimal strategy for an animal pursuing prey or escaping predators is to move at maximal speed. But the energy expense of exploiting full speed capacity can disfavor such a strategy, even in escape contexts, as evidenced by the fact that, oh my. So all in all, the main idea is you should not go at 100% if you are escaping prey. You should not go at 100% if you're escaping prey. Number of lizard 90 to 100. They're going at 90. Oh my gosh, I would have thought it would have been the exact opposite. I'm just thinking about a lion chasing a gazelle, and that gazelle should not go at 100% because it's going to disfavor. Ew. Even in escape contexts. So don't go at 100%. And then I did peek at because this is one uses data from the graph to complete the text. So we do have to use the graph. But all in all, the answer is going to support the main idea. And the main idea is that they should not go at 100%. Okay. A. Most lizard species use about the same percentage of their maximal speed when escaping predation as they do when pursuing prey. This is lizard species. Most lizard species go about the same percentage of their maximal speed. That was not the same. Maximal speed, no. 92, no. Escaping predation as they do when pursuing prey. That was very different. So no, not A is incorrect based on the data from the graph. B, multiple lizard species move at an average of less than 90% of their maximal speed while escaping predation. Number of lizard species move at, it'd be 8, escaping prey. Yeah. And I like the fact that an average of less than 90% because that's what the main idea is. You can't go your full. So I like B. C, more lizard species use on average 90 to 100% of their maximal speed while escaping predation than any other percentage of their maximal speed. While escaping predation. I mean, if I add it all, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's exactly the same. It's not more. So the C is wrong. So A and C are wrong. And D, at least 4 lizard species use on average less than 100% of their maximal speed while pursuing prey. Less than 100% of their maximal speed while pursuing prey. At least 4. It's 3. It's only 3. So actually that one's wrong too. So you see how the answer supported the main idea. B is the answer. So it supports the main idea. It goes less than the maximal speed. 90% is less than 100. So, and it's true for the data of the graph. In order to save time, and I often will save these. You notice, I don't know if you've noticed, I tend to spend a little more time on the graphs than I do on the reading because I know exactly what I'm looking for in the reading. I've done 100 million of them, and they tell us in the question what we're looking for. So the graphs, I tend to spend a little bit more time. The graphs I save for the end. I always will flag them or just skip them. And I'll show you at the end when you can go back and see which ones you left unanswered. And then I come back to them because I know that they're going to take me a little bit longer. But if I was worried about time, if I found one that was true for the main idea and it was true in the graph, I probably would pick it and just move on because there's only going to be one. They're not going to give you more than one. They can't. They're going to give you the wrong answer, more than one wrong answer. Which finding, if true, would most directly support the researcher's hypothesis? So the answer on here is so strict to the hypothesis. We're very strict to the hypothesis. Now, I'll tell you something. I was an English and reading and avid teacher for years and years and years. I've never been a science teacher. Math is not my strong suit. Science, some sciences I was interested in, but for science, I need something to grab onto. And if you remember the scientific method that you learned in middle school, where they're going to introduce a problem, come up with a hypothesis, go in with some research design and methodology, report the findings, say what they're going to do next. If I can think about that, then I can usually tie into something with the sciences. Also, I've noticed that on the sciences, there's 2 things going on. They're going to come in and introduce a scientific term that I absolutely need to know. I personally, not a scientist, just absolutely need to know this bit of information or need to be reminded of this bit of information. So I'm going to start off looking for that. Oftentimes, it's at the beginning. And then, of course, the question is asking us to support the hypothesis. So I have to find the hypothesis. And then for the science ones, I'm going to kind of blend the 2 of them and come up with my answer before I get down to the answers. The science ones are always very wordy and take a little bit of time. So supporting the hypothesis, we're going to try that strategy of what do I absolutely need to know? What are they introducing me to that I need to know? And then after that, where's the hypothesis? 16. Under normal atmospheric pressure at Earth's surface, water molecules form a tetrahedral network stabilized by hydrogen bonds between adjacent molecules. I'm 51. I needed to be reminded of that the water molecule form the network stabilized by hydrogen bonds between adjacent molecules. So it's stabilized by a hydrogen bond between adjacent molecules. I have in my head my picture of my little H2O, and it's stable. Got it. Extreme high pressure, such as found in deep ocean waters, destabilizes these bonds and compress water structure. I just thought of my little H2O compressing, getting squished, allowing water molecules within organisms to permeate proteins and impede crucial biological functions. Yet, deep sea organisms known as pisophiles, I didn't just crash out, I just was trying to figure out how to say that, pisophiles, have adapted to extreme pressure. Studies have found a positive correlation between the depths that various pisophiles inhabit and concentrations of a compound called TMAO in their muscle tissues. So they go down deep, it's a lot of pressure, and they have TMAO in their muscle tissues, which has led a team of researchers to hypothesize that TMAO reduces water's compressibility. Oh, there's the hypothesis, which has led a team of researchers to hypothesize that TMAO reduces water's compressibility. Okay, so I have my normal H2O, my little molecule, and if I bring my molecule down deep in the ocean, the water is going to try to compress it. And if I bring TMAO in, it's going to reduce the water compressibility, or it won't get so squished. So I have my base water molecule, and then TMAO is added, and it doesn't squish. Are we good? There's a lot of words in between that. Words I couldn't pronounce. A, we're supporting the researcher's hypothesis. Water molecules are found to be impervious to TMAO. I don't think they said the TMAO goes into the molecule. Even when the water molecule's tetrahedral configuration has been distorted by high pressure. No, that's not true. It needs the TMAO, and then it's not distorted by high pressure. So no. B, examination of TMAO's molecular structure shows that TMAO molecules retain their shape even as pressure increases. What would it matter about the TMAO's molecular structure? Doesn't it only matter about the molecules retaining not the TMAO molecule? No. Okay, it's not the TMAO molecules, it's the water molecule. It's the H2O. The TMAO is helping it not get. I don't like that one. Let's see C. A positive correlation is found between concentrations of TMAO and the rate at which water molecule structure compresses as pressure increases. There's a positive correlation is found between concentrations of TMAO and the rate at which water molecule structure. I mean, that's assuming that TMAO is always going to be present and keep it from going. I don't know if I love that one either, because I don't like assumptions. And all we're looking for is that TMAO reduces water compressibility. These words are making me think other things, but all we're looking for is that TMAO reduces water compressibility. D, analysis of waters, see the one water, apostrophe S, molecular structure under high pressure reveals that hydrogen bonds are more stable when TMAO is present than when it is not. That's exactly what we're looking for. That they're more stable when, the hydrogen bonds are more stable when TMAO is present than when it is not. Yes. D. Yes. See how it was a little bit of both? I had to remind myself that this is mostly about the water, the water molecules and what happens when they have a lot of pressure. Okay. The last two. When I get to logically completes the text, I always feel good. There's two things you have to remember about logically completes the text. Number one, their main idea. So it's really just you're coming up with the main idea statement and you're logically completing the text that aligns with the main idea statement. Kind of similar to what we were doing with the tables. So we were coming up with a main idea statement on the tables and looking for the answer that supported the main idea statement. There's also always a shift. So remember, we were looking for that shift at the very beginning. There is always a shift. So logically completes the text. And this is for the kids that aren't going to read. And we're tired. This is the last two reading ones. We're tired by the time we get here. I know. Come into logically completes the text thinking, okay, this is just main idea, and find the shift. And remember what we did with text 1 and text 2. Text 1 gave us an idea of what we were reading about. And then text 2 gave us the answer. And that's exactly what we're doing in here too. Text 1 is the top half. We find the shift. That's text 2. We're going to zone in on text 2. All right. So let's read this one. Sometimes they have words that I don't know how to pronounce, and I'm going to read them in my head and I'm not going to pronounce them outside. So I should go to the Jurassic Park movie and know how to say this, but I can't. The Cretaceous, whatever, is known for having an enormously oversized head, crest. Okay, so this dinosaur has a big head. Until an almost complete fossil skeleton was found in Brazil. Are we shifting already? Paleontologists have been able to study only skull specimens from T. navigans. Oh, they shortened that guy. Though it was presumed that, like other pterosaurus. The species' primary form of locomotion was powered flight. Okay, he had a big head. They once thought that he flew. That's what we know so far, right? Examining the fuller skeleton in 2016, Victor Brackeray and his team determined that T. navigans had long hind legs, short wings, and an unusually long neck, characteristics that combined with the creature's large crested head would have made sustained flight difficult and walking upright relatively comfortable. So it was a very subtle shift. They once thought that he had a big head and he flew, but now under further examination, this is the back half, this is the text 2 part that our answer comes from. We now understand, and look at the M dash, and it opens an M dash and closes with a period, and within it, it says the answer, characteristics that, combined with the creature's large crested head, would have made sustained flight difficult and walking upright relatively comfortable. So he didn't fly, he walked. Based on the findings, the team suggests that T. navigans likely walked and didn't fly. Yeah? A. Flew for longer distances than did other. Nope. He walked. B. Had longer wings than other species considered to have been comfortable walking. Maybe. I don't know. We'll keep it. C. Had a smaller head than the researchers expected based on the earlier T. navigans skull specimens. So we're changing? No, we can't do that. We can't change their findings. We can't change their findings. And D, flew for shorter distances and spent more time walking than researchers previously thought. There's your answer. See how simple when you find the shift and you think the main idea of that second part, that is your answer. It's always like that on logically completes the text. There's always a shift. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's nice. And they're like, previously they thought, or, whatever, but look for those shift. Consumer psychologists have identified that the likelihood that people who identify as ethical consumers, meaning that they strive to purchase goods and services with positive or neutral social and ecological effects, ooh, look at that M dash, telling us what an ethical consumer is. They strive to purchase goods and services with positive or neutral social and ecological effects. I hope I'm an ethical consumer. Will purchase a given product positively correlates with the perception of that product's effects. Okay, so I'm going to buy a product if I think that product is good. In a recent study, the attitudes of self-identified ethical consumers toward purchasing a specific mobile phone coming to the market, researchers found that on average, study participants in their 20s rated the phone's social and ecological effects much less positively than did participants in other groups. Oh, so people in their 20s are not ethical consumers? Among other things being equal, if consumer psychologist theory is correct, this finding suggests that, I think that's what it is, people in their 20s, because we found the shift in a recent study, that's it there, that the people in their 20s rated the things much less positively than did participants in other age groups. So people in their 20s are not ethical consumers. I'm not saying that. This guy's saying that. Okay, A. The phone is less appealing to ethical consumers in their 20s than other similar phones in the market are. The phone is less appealing? I don't think that's what it was. I think the people in their 20s rated it less. I don't like that one, but I don't like that one. B, ethical consumers in their 20s are less likely to purchase the phone than ethical consumers in other age groups are. Yeah, let's keep that one. C, there's not a meaningful difference in the likelihood of purchasing the phone among ethical consumers in different age groups. No, that's wrong. There was a big difference. Or D, ethical consumers in their 20s are more likely than ethical consumers in other age groups to consider a phone's social and ecological effects when deciding whether to purchase the phone. the ethical consumers in their 20s are more likely. No, it said the ethical consumers are less likely to rate it, are likely to rate it less positively. So that's not true. If I was going to look between A, I like A. The phone is, no. The phone is less appealing. No. To ethical consumers in their 20s, it wasn't about the phone. It was about ethical consumers in their 20s are less likely to purchase the phone than ethical consumers in other age groups are. Yes, that's what it is. Ethical consumers in their 20s are less likely to purchase the phone because up here, it was about text one, the first half of it was about ethical consumers are going to purchase it if it's good. B is ethical consumers in their 20s are less likely to purchase the phone than ethical consumers in other age groups are. And it wasn't about the phone being less appealing. It was about what the ethical consumers were going to do. There was one thing I wanted to show you. Here's another plural possessive. So there's more than one psychologist in this study, and those psychologist theories. And then here, there's only one product, apostrophe S. So there's only one product. Are we finally on grammar? Yes. Awesome. This will go fast now. Okay. All right. So what you're allowed to look at the answers on this one. Yeah, we're going to use the answers actually and pop them in on all the grammar. So feel free to look at the answers. The very key thing I'm noticing on number 19 is those are all verbs. We're just looking at the verb tense. So is it past tense? Is it present tense? Is it present perfect tense? Is it just, create? So that is driven by the subject. So you have to find the subject to find the correct verb. There are a couple things in here that they do to try to trick you because this is seemingly easy, right? So the seemingly easy ones, beware. So let's look at this one because I want to read it. The Boston Saloon was one of the most popular African-American owned establishments in 19th century Nevada. So it's 19th century Nevada. That gives us a clue. By businessman William A.G. Brown. The saloon was known to offer elegant accommodations and an inclusive environment. The subject in the second sentence, we're not looking for the subject in the first sentence. We're looking for the subject in the second sentence. And so we're looking for the verb that goes in the second sentence. The subject is William A.G. Brown. That's the person, place, or thing that is doing the stuff in the sentence. So that person is doing the stuff in the sentence. And then I can take that and pick my correct verb. William A.G. Brown created. Yeah. William A.G. Brown creates. It's not present. So he's not doing it right now. And it's not future tense. William A.G. Brown creating. William A.G. Brown create. So definitely William A.G. Brown created. Created by businessman William A.G. Brown. Yep. So A goes well in that one. So the steps on this, and I'll show you in a minute why it's so important to pay attention to it, is find the subject of the sentence and the verb that ties to that subject. You also, of course, have to be thinking about tense, but for number 20, now there is a TikTok guy that I have watched and I've been trying to debunk his myth, but I like it. So when there's a list of words and it's the same word and all they're doing is asking you which punctuation goes, right? So same word, which punctuation. When you have a list like this, then start with the one with no punctuation. Just start there. Let's have a review though, because that one means that there's a period after popularized, because a semicolon is a period. This one, I think we've only talked about two reasons why I'm letting you pick a comma. Don't pick a comma. I'm not letting you pick B, first of all, because it's a comma. So no, if it's a simple list, so 3 things, comma, and. If it's opening or closing in a positive, we've seen so many positives so far, haven't we? We've seen them on M dashes. I should have pointed out some. I will point out some with commas. Or transitions. Every single transition word gets a comma, and you knew that already. But that's key. Transition words get commas. So it's not rare to see a comma. you have to see a comma with transitions. So I'm not letting you pick B because that's not a transition word. C, we're going to start with, and D, that reads the poems popularized, for example. That's how that one reads. So let's see if that works, or we're just starting with C. Louise Bennett also, that's in a positive, 1916 to 2006 is in a positive. Louise Bennett, also known as Miss Lou, that's in a positive. See the comma? Also known as Miss Lou, because I could read it and say Louise Bennett was an influential Jamaican poet. So we noticed in a positive with commas, was an influential Jamaican poet and folklorist. Her innovative poems popularized the use of Jamaican Creole, another a positive, a spoken language in literature. Why do we need any punctuation? Her innovative poems popularized the use of Jamaican Creole. There's our positive, a spoken language in literature. Yep, we don't need it. C is the correct answer. So I'm glad we started with there. That'll save you time. And it only works like this. If there's a list of the same word and you're picking the punctuation, start with the one with no punctuation. Doesn't work every single time. That is the one with no punctuation, but at least you narrowed it down. So it's a strategy to help you narrow it down. But I love the fact that in here, here's in a positive. So I don't need that. Here's in a positive, yapping about Creole. And then this, also known as Miss Lou. Remember, I read it without it. Louise Bennett was an influential Jamaican poet and folklorist. So there's your positive with commas. So important. You'll see in a minute why it's so important. This one, nope, we can't rule out anything because it's just subject-verb agreement, but it's finding out what tense that verb create is. So he was just the man for such a place, and it was just the place for such a man. This line is from Frederick Douglass's. I want to tell you why that's apostrophe S. His last name ends with an S. You cannot change his last name. We can't change the spelling of his last name to make it like plural possessive or singular possessive. In fact, he's one dude, Frederick Douglass. He's not going to be plural possessive. He's going to be singular possessive. And so we add an apostrophe S. So even if your last name ends with an S, you're going to add an apostrophe S when you want to show ownership. So Frederick Douglass owns that autobiography. It's his autobiography. So we add an apostrophe S. Sorry, I had to yap about that because kids just automatically want to do the S apostrophe, but you haven't added on any possession. So that's how you do that. Autobiography, narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, 1845. It's another thing, this IT apostrophe S. On this test, it's only used as the conjunction. It is. It will never be used as like a possessive form of a pronoun. So it's never going to say it's never going to be its. In fact, College Board doesn't even think that's a word. So it is. An example of anti-metaboly, a writing technique that emphasizes that something emphasis by repeating a statement in the reverse order. I just yapped so much. Forgot what we were doing. Okay. It's an example, it singular, of anti-metaboly. Singular, one type. So let's just take it. It create? No. It are creating? No. It have created? No. It creates? Yes. Sometimes changing everything to a pronoun helps a lot for subject-verb agreement. This one's easy. We're just picking the type of punctuation. So researchers Amit Kumar and Nicholas Epley investigated how do people perceive acts of kindness in a series of experiments. So like, why would we have a question mark? So get rid of B and C. And when I was reading that, I read it with A. And how people perceive acts of kindness. How do people perceive acts of kindness? What do you think? Yeah. D. Otherwise, we would have needed a question mark. All right, here's a big one. This one is big. There's a lot going on. It's a subject-verb agreement. I can see this is a verb. It's a thing that they're doing. Reveal, revealed, reveals, reveal. It's what they're doing. Yes. So, in a painting titled The Milkmaid by Johannes Vermeer, the artist prominently features a bread basket, milk pitcher, and bowl. Okay, there's my first okay. I'm okay with this use of commas. It's a simple list. There's 3 things: bread basket, milk pitcher, and bowl. Such coition objects, depicted in exquisite detail by Vermeer, a painter celebrated for his naturalism, reveal whatever the daily minutiae of 7th century Dutch household. So this back half of the sentence is what they're asking for us to tie our verb, and we have to determine what the subject is. But what they have sneakily done is given us a positives in between the subject and to look at such coition objects depicted in exquisite detail by Vermeer. That's yapping about the objects. But then also a painter celebrated for his naturalism. That comma to comma is yapping about Vermeer. This painting isn't necessarily about Vermeer. I mean, this sentence isn't about Vermeer. A painter celebrated for his naturalism. So we do not want to, we don't want to keep that. We should get rid of that. That's in a positive yapping about Vermeer, and it's getting in between our ability to pick the subject and the verb. The other one is they're talking about objects, and then they do a comma, depicted in exquisite detail by Vermeer. That's yapping. This in between the comma, depicted in exquisite detail by Vermeer, that's yapping about the objects. And since that's yapping about the objects, I don't really want that either. So I kind of only want to keep such coition objects. I want to get rid of all of this comma. I want between depicted in exquisite detail by Vermeer, a painter celebrated for his naturalism. If I can get rid of all of that, then I can completely understand that my subject is objects, plural. And then I can say objects was revealing the daily minutiae. No. Objects has revealed the daily minutiae. Maybe if it's present. Objects reveals the daily minutiae, or the objects reveal the daily minutiae. Plural objects reveal the daily minutiae of 7th century Dutch household. I took a long time on that one. That one took a lot because I wanted to make sure that you saw that on this test, the reason why you have to know what appositives are is they're trying to break you up from the subject to get you to pick the wrong verb. I can't tell you how many kids I've worked with where they wanted to say Vermeer was the subject of the sentence. And really you just have to notice those appositives in between, totally cross them out, use the tools that are available to you to cross them out, and then read it without it. Make sure it's in a positive, but then tie your subject to your verb. That was a lot, I know. Now, when I get to these ones, I automatically think I like how they're set up, and what they're testing me is what punctuation goes. That's what they're doing. So on here, I could tell, they were looking for subject-verb agreement. Down here, I know that they're just testing me on what subject goes. Sorry, I said that wrong. What punctuation, what boundaries we need. Okay, so I automatically want to start with one that breaks it up. So before, when we started with a list and it was the same word over and over and they were just looking for punctuation, I started with one without. On these, I want to start with the one with. I want to look for something that's going to break it up. The best way to break it up is either a period or a semicolon. So I want to start there, just if I can narrow them down. Again, I'm not letting you pick B. I'm not going to let you pick a comma unless it's one of the 3 reasons why. And I do not see a transition. I do not see a simple list, and I do not see an appositive, but I probably have to read it. Nonetheless, I want to see, does it work with C? Jamaican British artist William Wigan is known for his remarkable microsculptures. Period. Creations so small they are best viewed through a microscope. Wigan's sculptures are made from tiny materials such as spiderweb strands. that stands on its own. Both of these sentences can stand on their own, and they have a period in between. So 24 works. Same exact thing. Look at what they're doing up here on 25. Same exact thing. So they're seeing, can I break it up? Consider the mechanics of the pinhole camera. For example, light passes through a small hole, resulting in a focused projected image. A ray diagram reveals how this works. And I want to do the period or the semicolon. How this works, period. Because the hole's small size restricts light to a single ray, all light passing through the hole can only arrive at a single destination, eliminating diffraction and ensuring a clear image. And that works, yes. It's not going to be a ray diagram reveals how this works. For example, it's because the hole, because essentially that means that we would lose like all of that back half information. And I think we do kind of need it. And we're definitely not going with that comma. It is because there's no reason for that comma. So we're going to do a period in between. Now, with that said, you might have asked me already out loud or in your head, if there is a answer where it B like this has a period and say just for example that D was a semicolon, I would normally default to crossing both of those out. Because they're doing the same thing. A period is a semicolon and a semicolon is a period. So if they're doing the same thing, then we'll cross them both out. 26, in a search for extraterrestrial life. Oh, we're on transitions. So on transitions, what you're going to do is you're just going to think like, okay, there's always, so they put the transitions in the middle of the sentence. Are they shifting from one idea to another? So are they moving from one idea to another? And if so, then we pick a transition that shows a shift. Are they giving us more information? If so, then we pick a transition word. That means they're getting more information. And remember, I told you every transition word has a comma. Every transition word has a comma, always. That's one of my rules. Okay, so let's see what they're doing. In the search for extraterrestrial life, our astrobiologists Stuart Bartlett and Michael Wong proposed that scientists avoid using the term life. Don't use the term life. Should use, I'm thinking like instead, researchers, so instead, they should use another word, life. Yep. For example, life. They should use, for example, L-Y-F-E. So stop using L-I-F-E instead. So you see that contrast there? Let's do another one. We're looking for, is it a contrast or are they adding on more information? Before it unveiled a massive new gallery in 2009, the Art Institute of Chicago was only able to display about 5% of its art collection. The museum is able to display close to 30% of the collection. So they're comparing. It's a time lapse, I think. So in 2009, it could only do 5%, and additionally, for example, today the museum is able to display close to 30% of its collection. So comparison. That was a comparison, but it was almost like a time lapse. Working together with Navajo Nation Department of Water Resources, Dr. Lanai analyzed data about snowpack levels in the Chuska Mountains. She found that the snowpack, the amount of snow on the ground, was deepest in early March at lower elevations. And then it seems like it's going into a contrast here, right? Lower elevations and at higher elevations, the snowpack was deepest in mid-March. So at lower elevations, it was early March. At higher elevations, it was mid-March. We're going, in other words, no. For instance, on the other hand, or in summary, it's not in summary. On the other hand, at higher elevations, on the other hand, the snowpack, so that we're going for our contrast. The Inca of South America used intricately knotted string devices called quipus to record countable information like population data and payments. They may have used quipus to record more complex information like stories and myths. Oh, they're giving us more information about how they used it. So at first they used it to record countable information, and then they used it to record more complex information. Not as a result. In other words, in addition, they may have like also used Quipus to record more, for example, now. So in addition, so there's a couple ways they used the Quipus. How cool. Very cool. And last one. In hindsight, given the ideas about the natural world circulating among British scientists in the 1800s, the theory of natural selection was an obvious next step. It may not have been a coincidence that Charles Darwin and Alfred Wallace arrived at the concept independently. It may not have been a coincidence that they arrived at the concept independently. Indeed, contrary, so they're not, it's not a, they're not moving on to more information. Merge from politics. Okay, so it may not have been a coincidence. However, it may not have been a coincidence then, if then. Moreover, they're not adding on more information or like proving a point. For example, I don't think they're giving an example because they stated a claim. They arrived at the concept independently. Then it may not have been a coincidence then that Charles Darwin and Alfred Wallace arrived at the concept independently. Yes. Okay, now we're on to the bulleted ones. There's only a few of these. Some tests, there's usually 3. Some tests have 4. I think there's 1 practice test with 5, but you'll usually have 3. And you're at the end. If your timing is at 5 minutes and you have 5 minutes to do the last 3, you're in perfect timing. So again, we are doing what we always do. We're starting with the question. Always start with the question. The student wants to emphasize Janaki Amal's achievement. So just like the hypothesis questions, just like the author's purpose, just like the main idea, they're telling you exactly what the answer has to have. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. The answer has to have an emphasis of Janaki Amal's achievement. It's apostrophe S. It's one person, Janaki Amal's achievement. If I need to go up and use the bulleted information, it's there for me. But let's just see if I can get rid of some that do not emphasize an achievement. All right, A. By crossbreeding the important sugarcane species with grasses native to India, Amal succeeded in creating sugarcane hybrids well suited to India's climate. That seems like an achievement. The other word for succeeded was success. So that seems like an achievement. I like that one. B, in the 1930s, the Imperial Sugarcane Institute, which enlisted Amal, sought to limit dependence on imported sugarcane. That was not about Amal, so no. C, Amal was enlisted by the Imperial Sugarcane Institute at a time when a local variety of sugarcane needed to be produced. That's how they hired her. That's their achievement for hiring her, not her achievement. And D, as part of efforts to breed a local variety of sugarcane, an imported sugarcane species called Saccharum officium was crossbred with grasses native to India. That has nothing to do with her achievement. So A is the only one that talks about her achievement. These bulleted ones, they're telling you exactly what they want the answer to have. The answer has to have an emphasis of Janaki Amal. Let's see what this one has to have. The student wants to emphasize a similarity between the 2 sculptures. So the answer has to have an emphasis of a similarity. So we're not looking for contrast. That's the only thing that's going to trip people up on these ones, is to have the idea like moving from one of them is a contrast, one of them's emphasizing a similarity, one of them's emphasizing an achievement. So just this quick succession of moving from looking for one thing to another. That's why kids could get these ones wrong. These are expression of ideas. Remember, I mentioned that at the beginning. expression of ideas. And these and transition words are the only two sections of the test in expression of ideas. So if you got low on expression of ideas, it's probably either you don't know your transition words or you ran out of time and just didn't see how simple these questions are. So the student wants to emphasize a similarity between the two sculptures. Only one of these is going to have a similarity between the two sculptures. A. Catlet's Students Aspire depicts two figures supporting each other in pursuit. That's only one sculpture. B. Recognition and Students Aspire both show African American figures in poses that symbolize supportive relationships. They both show, yes. C. Catlett completed Recognition in 1970, and students that is not emphasizing the similarity. That's just when they were completed. And D. The figures in Recognition have features that are rounded and indistinct, while the features in Students Aspire have sharply defined features. That's the contrast. So A is the correct answer. We only have one more. I am starting with the question. The student wants to make a generalization about the materials used in Dow replicas. So only about the materials used in Dow replicas. Let's see if we can get rid of some before we look up at the bullets. A traditional material that is used to stitch together the hulls of ancient dhows. Coconut palm fiber is still used by shipbuilders. That is about the materials, but that's not very general. I don't know. All right, B. The ancient Arab dhow was a sailing vessel used primarily for trade and distinguishable by its triangular sails. That wasn't anything about materials. That's about what it was. So no B. C. Although most materials used in dhow replicas are traditional, some modern materials are used. That was about materials and it's pretty general, so I like C. D. Contemporary shipbuilders in Oman built replicas of the dhow, which was an ancient sailing vessel with a stitched hull construction. That wasn't about the materials used. So you see how A is very specific, coconut palm fiber rope, or C, it talks traditional and modern, and that is a generalization. So I pick C. And I did that without looking at the bullets. So I've read probably 100 of these. On another video, I'll show you how to pull some examples for yourself to just practice certain sections. So there was one, I just wanted to make sure that I was on the right track with these ones with the bulleted section. There, out of probably 100, there's probably 3 that I actually had to use the bullets to make sure that I understood what the question was actually asking me. But all in all, the very first thing I did though was I went through and tried to narrow down and say, okay, this doesn't actually do what the question is asking me to do, so I can get rid of it. And then I use the bulleted information, and that's just another way to save time. You can and you will do well on this test. You can and you will do well on this test. I went over all the little secrets just here in test 6, and you can and you will do well on this test. You have to know what an appositive is. You have to know how M dashes and the appositives can help you answer tough questions. You have to start with the question and actually answer the question. You have to read all of it. I'm sorry. You have to read all of it. And you have to believe that you have every skill that you can do well on this test, and you can and you will do well on this test.